10 minutes I've been given, and also because the world is like on fire. And if you're like me, you store some anxiety in your body and don't really recognize it. Lately, I've been using this mindfulness practice of imagining I'm like a scuba diver. So at the surface, if you're old enough, Jacques Cousteau is there, and before he goes down under the surface, the waves are crashing against the boat and pulling him this way and that way, and it's loud and chaotic. But the second he goes under the water, everything slows down and there's calm, peace. So I myself was having tension in my chest and it felt so unhealthy. I started doing this mindfulness meditation where I dove down under the chaos of the world, but also below the chaos within me. And it was so beautiful. And I make this sound in my head when I do it. I go, because it seems that simple for Jacques Cousteau. I just go, oh, to this place where my body can exhale the full exhale. My shoulders sink, not caught up in all the tension they've been holding. So I invite you to this place where the beautiful you who is enough and is loved resides, and where we gather tonight. So I get to this beautiful privilege of teaching spirituality. It's a tough word, spirituality. I've got they're called HUCs, which means health unit coordinators. They're kind of the unit secretary. And when I go to teach a class, they don't want to announce over the intercom spirituality class. I can't say that word. I don't want to announce it. Here, I can't say it. Anyway, what a privilege to be able to teach in a hospital spirituality classes that help people to really hold on to the very things that make them strong in their unique giftedness. I have this conviction that we are all a unique gathering of wonderfulness. None of us the same as the other. And so our job is to be who we have been called to be. But it's not easy. The redwood tree has been such a passion for me, and I keep learning more and more. So I'm going to read a little bit from conservationist Richard Campbell. In an early version of a now famous passage, John Muir wrote, "When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find that it is bound fast by 1,000 invisible cords that cannot be broken to everything in the universe." He goes on, not the quote, "New research is proving the great conservationist right in ways even he could not have realized. We've long known that trees whose roots touch and connect can exchange nutrients, and that linking into vast underground networks of fungi known as mycorrhizae, I have no idea if that's correct pronunciation, which appear on the surface only as innocuous mushrooms. These enable trees to grow far faster. But some emerging research is beginning to discover the extent of these connections. The fungal web that allows a tree access to far more nutrients than its roots alone can gather also connects trees to one another, both within and across species. In one particularly cool example," Campbell writes, "this type of mutualistic relationship one in which both creatures benefit from one another. Research in the Douglas fir forests of British Columbia shows that trees provide one another with needed carbon during times when one species' productivity is low. Douglas fir trees share with birches during the spring and fall, when the deciduous trees are leafless, while regenerating firs get the benefit of the birch's excess carbon during the summer months. So, I mean, it is so glorious that science is exposing the wisdom of God in creation, that none of us is created for the fierce independence that our country honestly kind of idolizes. We're made for interdependence, and we're never going to be better than we're connected to one another. So, what are those connections that really feed you and help you to be you? And this can sound selfish, but it's the symbiotic thing that this naturalist was writing about. Meaningful relationships are mutual. We give and receive. My artwork, I add beauty to the world, but I also am experiencing, this might be a little bold to say, the image of our Creator God within me. So I give and receive. And I feel like all of the connections that we have that help us to be who we've been created to be have this kind of a mutuality, informing who we are and giving us courage for that, and also being a blessing to the world that God loves. So this is the rootedness. I heard the redwood trees in California. I think I put it in my video, but Blur's Day, I don't remember anything anymore. The image of holding hands underground, that these trees, if they're shaken, say they're going to fall this way, that tree holds them up, but they hold this tree up. It's so beautiful. So different times in our lives are going to require different connections. Also, connections come and go. Friendships or relationships come to an end. And I can say that my dad still helps me be who I am, but it's not the same. He died 6.5 years ago, right? And so the man I would call in any need, who would jump up and down to be the person to help me, he's not here, right? So, right. Anyway, so there's change. And retirement, of course, is going to demand change. Where I most frequently teach this class is in our pain clinic. And in the clinic, there are people who forever will be changed by some of the losses they've had in their life. They're going to get stronger. They're going to get more mentally clear. They're going to be able to do so much more than they did before. But the thing I emphasize the most is that I don't want them to wait to accept themselves until they return to the person they knew before whatever caused their chronic pain. Because we have this way that if I could just do this, then I'll be all right. We have this measure of criticalness with ourselves. And so they have to do some real solid and hard work. If this, I don't know, downhill skiing was their great passion, and they will never be able to do it again. They still need to think about, how did that feed me? What fulfillment did I get from that? And even if it will be different, they use the concept of modification very frequently. How can I recapture some of that passion and excitement in my life? So a person who isn't going to be a pastor in the same way, or isn't going to pastor a church at all, maybe wants no leadership role in any religious aspect, still the reflection about in what ways did that mutuality of my functioning in ministry feed me so that I'm not going to just be starving when I quit that. So that's what I'm all about in being part of this retreat tonight. And I'm just passionate for people to think about honoring who they are in every season of their life. I'm pretty sure now I took my 10 minutes, Laura.
That's pretty good. Yeah, thank you, Corinne. So did you all get this connections that was attached to the email? So based on, and if you had a chance to watch Corinne's video and now what she's elaborated on here, spend some time on this if you haven't already. And this will, when we meet again on Thursday, this is what we're going to kick off from on Thursday, is rooted in this. But this is, you know, this is how we wanted to root this retreat, was in this connectedness, this how do we tend to who we are, who we've always been and who we're growing into. And so with that foundation under our feet, then you have to do what we've always been asked to do as pastors, right? Is we have this deep foundation. And now what I want you to think about is I want you to think about the ways in which our society thinks about retirement, the things that are said out loud to you about what your retirement will be like. What I'm going to do is share my screen, and we committee members sent me pictures that represent sort of the things that we our society says retirement embodies. Can you see my screen? Am I sharing it with you? Okay, so as you think about retirement, the ways that you are rooted and connected to other people, places, and practices. Now, as I'm going to scroll slowly through these pictures, and I want you to choose a couple of pictures. One that sort of typifies for you how retirement is portrayed in our culture. And then two, what do you want your retirement to look like? Now, don't be limited by our pictures. If you don't see a visual of what you're imagining or what you think is very stereotypical, then you can tell us if you want to share. And then we don't all have to share, but if you feel called to share after I've scrolled through these, you are welcome to do that. So, and let me know if you want me to back up or stop. Okay, that's the end of the pictures. So just back to these two questions. What jumped out at you as sort of a typical vision of retirement? And then what's your vision of retirement? And if there wasn't a picture that fits your vision, then share with us what that looks like for you.
Well, I've often watched people retire, and there have been some that they just go off a cliff, and in that way, they a lot of them die. I mean, they don't plan, and then they quit working, and something happens to your body. So I love those pictures that portray this happy ending, this time in your life where you can fill it up, with stuff, you've been imagining or haven't had time to do. I like that one with the fisherman talking about not having to live to work, but finding in life something. I don't know. It appealed to me. I think. But then there were some new ideas I saw too. It's like gardening. Oh, I've always wanted to be a good gardener, but never really had the opportunity. So maybe that. I'm still kind of deciding. So
Thanks, Tim.
There's one of the sisters at St. Mary's. There's still, I don't know, it's less than 10, maybe 8 or 9 sisters who live in the convent at St. Mary's Hospital. And Sister Lauren still has an office, and she's working on the archives. She's working every day, and she is 99 years old. So it's kind of funny that this clock is in her office, but if I had sent something to Laura, which honestly I didn't, I made the video, that's what I did. But if I had sent something in, I would have taken a picture of her clock. The wall clock, all the numbers have kind of fallen down and are resting in odd piles at the bottom. So it's like this, what time is it? I don't know, doesn't matter. And I think not being on someone's schedule and not, having that freedom is kind of a powerful image for me.
Ron and I live on the prairie, and I noticed there was none of the prairie. And for me, the vision I have is being able to see again. I think with ministry, we get rooted in what we're seeing right immediately around us that needs to be done. And for me, the prairie, the open spaces, and seeing sunsets. Notice I didn't say sunrises. I'm not up that early. But the beauty of connecting with creation and connecting with God and others as I look at God's world through being rooted in the dirt and rooted in the ground, like Corinne was talking about.
I agree with you, Joyce, the reconnection to nature. But I also took offense at some of the signs that said, well, this was my life before, and then
Right.
when I retire, it's going to be absolutely
New life.
opposite. And that's not it. I'm still taking me wherever I go. So, though I would like to do more traveling, but we would all like to do that now because we can't do it. But Kevin, you had something the picture that spoke to you.
Oh, the 3-generation picture with the grandfather, his son, and the grandson out on the boat, spending time together, having time together as a family, as a 3-generation.
So more relational.
Relational. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So as part of the planning committee, I've seen a lot of those pictures before.
You generated most of them, Art, so thank you.
I appreciate the fact that you left out some of the crasser images in my mind. There was no picture of, crazy old people playing shuffleboard down in Florida. That's one image that I kind of enjoyed when I submitted it to you.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
There were a few other ones similar to that, you know, you've got time now, you can do stuff, but you just sort of make things up to fill that time instead of finding a purpose and putting that to use. I appreciate the ones with the water as well. The very first one with the bicyclists as a couple riding bikes. You know, today we went snowshoeing for the first time together. Maybe that's a pursuit. My wife, planning for retirement, already bought us a new boat. So I expect that there's going to be time on the water. And that's going to be wonderful. And it's going to include grandkids, I hope, as part of that 3 generations together again, once COVID is over with and we can be together.
Yeah, thank you.
Art, something you were saying there reminded me of this kind of honoring of the elders, or expecting that the elders of a society have wisdom to pass on. And so much of that happens in those, you don't plan it. It's time together with the younger generations that bring the moments that are of the greatest importance and opportunities for teaching. Yeah, I hear that in things that a number of people are saying, and it makes me hopeful.
When Noelle and I talk about retiring, we don't have roots really anywhere, so we can't quite imagine where that will be. And then the other thing is, well, and it's also like 10 years off still, so we're dreaming, but and our kids are young adults, but we do, the other reason we have trouble imagining where is because we don't know where our kids will be. And so that aspect of wanting to connect and be part of the next generation or the next generation after that of their life seems really essential. And then I love the nature pictures, and what was missing is like a walking path, because that's what I imagine. I want to live near a place that I like to walk in, and not like a neighborhood, but a woods or a walking path of some kind, where I can also bicycle. I like the bicycle picture, or cross country ski, and then I could imagine, I also want to live in a place where there's cultural diversity. And when I get the chance, like I'd like to do it now, but I don't have time now, but I'd really, really like to do ESL training or teaching, and then just build relationships with people cross-culturally and have friends from other cultures. I'd like to build on that.
You might be a beautiful couple teaching those classes.
Right.
I have too many ideas for other people. I apologize, but it came into my head and I had to say it.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything else, Noelle?
I think it's okay.
And we want to travel.
Well, so hearing these, introductions of all of you, and then, hearing these reflections just on these pictures and your dreams, and, what you don't want and what you do want. I want to turn it over to our panelists now. So tonight we're going to really have them talk, and you ask questions as well, interject. But tonight is about preparing for retirement. And then Thursday night we'll be living into retirement. And so I sent our panelists a couple of different questions to think about. And so I'll just throw those out, Mark and Rick. And you can talk about them as you've thought about them. And then everyone, you are invited to raise your hand or just unmute if you've got a comment or a question or want to hear more about something. And let's see, it's about 10 to 7, and we'll take a stretch break at 7. How about for about 5 minutes, if that sounds okay? So let's get going with our first question. Was really, I mean, it's kind of this wide open. What advice would you give to someone preparing to retire? And here's your captive audience that some are closer than others to preparing to retire.
I'll go first. I think of only a couple of people here knew what I did for a living before I retired. I was a bishop in the Northwest Synod of Wisconsin. So I learned some things about retirement doing that. And so I'll put that hat on a little bit, is if you haven't participated in the portico events, please do that, to help you prepare financially, et cetera, et cetera. They were really, really helpful. They were helpful to us, and I know they're helpful, and I think they're more accessible now, ironically, because of COVID, because you don't have to go to a physical place. So I think that's important. And the other thing for pastors and spouses is in retirement is figuring out who you are. Because so often for us, what we do is who we are. And Brenda, you talked about it even as a spouse, is, who am I in retirement? And then, so part of that is, where are you going to live? And are you going to move? Are you not going to move? And then tapped into that is the whole boundary issue. Is, what are my boundaries now that I'm not under call as a pastor and as a pastor's spouse? And those are things to really work through, and to do things like we're doing tonight, but also to go to pastors or spouses that you admire and they seem to have done this well, and to talk to them and to learn from them what they've learned. Because what we do in some ways is really weird. And so it makes retiring weird, because it's different. It just really is.
Yep, I'll follow up on
Go
that,
ahead,
Rick.
Mark.
Yeah, your comment about, in some ways, what we do is weird and it makes retirement weird. That's really true for pastors, because you have to be very intentional and clear about the boundaries. You're not anyone's pastor anymore, and so that means, in my case, I was a pastor at the same congregation for 32 years. I was marrying kids that I baptized, that kind of thing. And so, and I'm not going to be their pastor anymore. And they have to realize that. I have to realize that. And what it has meant for me, in a sense, is that you release these relationships, but it really means that those relationships are released, but they're really, for me, there isn't a relationship anymore, other than maybe in my prayers. And so all these relationships that I had, I don't have them anymore. And that's the really weird part about it. And you need to be prepared for that too. It helped for my wife and I that we moved away from Winona. That was the one thing I knew for sure that I really needed to do, that I would not be able to live in Winona, because I had to make that break for my sake and for the sake of the congregation. People have stayed in town, in the same community where they served for a long time. My father did that. He retired in 1992. He was in Wilmer at Bethel, served there for 25 years, much beloved, and they still live in Wilmer, although they're down here in Tucson in the summer. But he was able, I think, to make that work. because he didn't get in the way of other pastors. So everybody's going to have to do that a little differently. Other advice, if you, those, if you,
Hey,
some
Mark,
of you are,
Mark,
oh
can
yeah,
I interrupt
gonna
you?
pause?
Yeah, no, what I wanted is, can you talk a little bit more? Can you say more about, so I'm seeing Kent has put in the chat here, like, having, been someone's pastor for so long, how to make that break mentally. Like, what are some steps or practices that you had as you prepared to make that break of those relationships really ending? What was helpful to you to practice?
Sure. I would say we were really planning seriously for retirement for a few years, and that helped because I was putting myself, even though I wasn't talking about it with anyone other than my wife, I was putting myself in the mindset of leaving, 2-3 years before we left. And that could be difficult to do, except that we were in a building project, and so I didn't have time to do anything else. It was easy not to leave mentally while we were in the midst of all that. But so that was an advantage to me. The other thing is that I announced my retirement, let's say 6-8 months ahead of time, something like that. And so I began talking about it in my Bible study classes and some sermons and newsletter articles. And it also helped that the assistant to the bishop came and visited the council to do some prep work for a call process. And she went over those same things as well. But a lot of it for me anyways was that I had been actually working on leaving for a couple of years before I left. So that's one part of it.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Mhm. Other advice, boy, talk. If you have a spouse, talk about it. If you don't have a spouse, find a trusted friend, and just talk about what your hopes and dreams are. Use your imagination, and start to imagine yourself. Imagine yourself not working anymore. I like the slide that says something about living to work and working to live. And some years ago, my wife and I were in sabbatical. We were in northern Italy, and we happened to be visiting with a German guy who loved northern Italy because he said, well, we Germans, we live in order to work, but these Italians, they work in order to live. And he had it exactly right. We often we combine doing with being, but doing is what we do rather than be. I don't know if that makes sense, but when you're retired, you don't have to do, and so you have to figure out what it means to be, and that's some work, and you can need to give yourself time to do that, and some grace, some significant grace.
I know we have a new question in the hopper, but I wanted to share about a senior pastor I worked with as an associate pastor in my second call. I was, 29. And we had a shtick. We'd stand next to each other and he'd say, ask me how long I've been ordained. And they'd say, okay, Pastor Ken, how long have you been ordained? And he'd say, longer than she's been alive. Which was true, which is beautiful. When I was working with him, we calculated when I was exactly half his age. I'm like, now I'm going to be catching up. Anyway, in their plan, I love the emphasis about who are you, and who are you matters to who your partner is. And when they prepared for retirement, Ken knew that he would want to be participating in more of the chores at home. But he also was pretty certain he did not want his wife watching over his shoulder as he learned. how to do the laundry, and he had a list of other things he really wanted to learn.
I don't do that, do I?
So they just planned it. He retired a year before she did. So he could like get his footing on being
You
different.
do
in the
fine,
home.
man.
So I mean, I think, and maybe that's more old school than you all because you're younger than he is, but who are we and what do each of us need moving into the next phase, and how can we accommodate for what the needs are for each other? It's a beautiful dance that they did. They're doing great, although he didn't really retire. He's terrible at retiring. Terrible. Interim after interim, so whatever.
Yeah, and I suppose that is retirement for some.
No, it is. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say
Yep.
that.
Yeah, that retiring.
It's
to
perfect for them.
a different way.
And
Yeah,
it's one of the things that's different about what we do is retirement can look different for all of us because there's options out there.
Mhm.
No, that's
Um,
true. And they travel a little bit and they like that.
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain Synod, huge, huge.
And those options can help financially. They can help us still serve the church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I would like to second what Rick said too. Really do some work at getting your financial house in order. Those Portico seminars, talk to a Portico financial planner. That's really important because you don't want financial stress that's unexpected. Retirement. So that financial planning piece is really important. That'll really help you ease into retirement if you feel financially set. And that's going to mean different things for different people. Some will not work, some will work. But as long as that's part of your plan, that will really be helpful for you.
And find, not just Portico. We went to Portico, but we also found an outside advisor.
Yeah.
Who knows pastor stuff. And, we have some significant financial advantages because of housing. And, the money that's been put into Portico that we can take out in retirement for housing, comes out tax deferred.
That's right. I gotta look at it because I have that housing.
Yes, not just housing, anything that went in. I'm not going to give you financial advice. It's not my job, but learn what those things are because they make a big, big difference in your finances when you retire. It's a significant advantage. Find people that you trust, talk to pastors who are retired, get names from them, etc. Because it can really make a difference.
Joyce has asked a question that we're actually going to get to in a few more questions. But is there any other Mark and Rick, as you just think broadly about, you've really been in the nooks and crannies of this, but any other advice that you just find really critical for people to be chewing on and considering and prayerful about?
I think, as I saw Joyce's question came up, was it Joyce about how do you know when or?
Yeah, and we are gonna get to that.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay.
Well, I'll add a couple things. One thing that is a shift that it's obvious, I guess, but it's another one of those strange things for pastors is that you need to imagine yourself sitting in the pew on Sunday morning, and that's different. Imagine yourself sitting in the pew and listening to a sermon. I decided that I was not going to have anything to do with preaching for at least a year, just because I needed to figure out what it means to be a member of a congregation. Well, that's been delayed for us because of COVID, but you may need some extended time just sitting in the pew in order for you to adjust to not being pastor anymore, unless you're going to do interim work or something like that, which is also a good option. Like for me, sitting in the pew and graciously and gratefully listening to a sermon, that's still kind of a work in progress, to tell you the truth.
And when your
Um,
spouse asks you about the sermon and what you thought, you keep your mouth shut.
So, yeah, yeah, that's been one of the more challenging things for me, interestingly enough. I'd also say if retirement is coming up for some of you, and if you're not moving, if you're staying in your same community, and maybe even if you are moving, but especially if you're staying in your same community, I would definitely plan to be away. I mean, to leave town for at least a few weeks, the day after you retire, if not more, if you have a chance to travel. When my father retired, he was 62, I think, and they left town for, I think, 6 months before they came back. And that was actually really important for them.
I remember right, Bethel gave them a van, didn't they?
They gave them a car. They traded
As a
that
car.
brand new Oldsmobile for a conversion van, and they
That's what
put
it
on the
was.
miles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, plan to just get out of Dodge for a while, at least 2 weeks, if not more. And then decide where you're going to live. That's a significant decision.
One of the things that is kind of on this list, but when we were talking about where we were going to live, because we were at the time living in northwestern Wisconsin, and I mean, we could have lived anywhere in the world. That's the reality. We can go anywhere. And I just turned to my wife and I just said, because this is how it was for us. I said, you have followed me around through our entire married life. Where do you want to go? And she made the call. And it was the right one. We moved back. It kind of goes in where Mark was. I had served in Painesville from 86 to 2000 at Painesville Lutheran. And that's where Diane said, her words were, I want to go home. Because that's where our girls were raised. And we had a lot of friends there. And this was the kind of friends you had in a parish before we learned about boundaries. About, it was okay for us, but, so I was really, really careful. I sat down with Bishop Anderson. He was the first person I talked to and said, this is what we want to do, but I'm not going to do it if you say no. And you got to help us through this process. And he did. And so he said, okay, when you make the decision, nobody in that community nobody can hear about this before the pastors at the church. So they have to be the first people you talk to. And we did. And we did. And then when retirement came, we talked to the pastors and said, okay, we're going to move there, but we're not going to join that church unless you say it's okay. And if you say it's not okay, nobody's going to know about this conversation. Because there's lots of Lutheran churches in Minnesota. And they said it was okay. And we've been gone almost 20 years by then. And it's worked out really, really well. I had to say no to a couple things early on. It's a powerful word when you're retired, is you just say some strategic no's. And people who are healthy figure it out. And I would think Mark would say that too. They want you to come back and do something or whatever. So,
Yeah, it's a really important word. That's right.
Let's just take a 5-minute break. If you need to use the facility or what, just get up and stretch. And let's convene again at 7:15. So it's just about 10 after now. So 5 minutes.
Where,
Who brought up the story of being and doing? Was that you, Mark?
Yeah.
So my first career was interior designer. And when I left that, I had a friend that talked to me and said, you know, you're not what you do, it's who you are.
Yeah.
So that really helped. So I had to face that, I don't know, 30 years ago. So it was helpful because we do get tied up in who we are as our, whatever our job title is.
Just there was some back and forth conversation going on just as we were finishing the break here, and it was about the word obligation came up. And just to, I would like to throw that out just for Rick and Mark, for you to just say more about that to the group, about that word obligation. And maybe that factors into the timing question of how do you know it's time to retire? But I hadn't thought of that word in particular, and it's a powerful one.
Well, I'll share my story. I was talking to Laura and Mark about this. I was elected bishop in 2013, and bishops are elected for a 6-year term. And I always think that's an ironic word. It's like a prison term, but you have to serve this long. And about 4.5 years in, I just started getting restless. And it was never about, I didn't like what I was doing. I was burned out. There was none of that stuff. And it took me a while to realize it was the same restlessness I had every other time I moved, when it was just the call was over. And, and I talked to a lot of people, both in the church, but one of the best conversations I had is I went to see a counselor who had no church baggage at all. Mm-hmm. And she really talked me through and gave me some straight talk. And just finally she said, so why are you still doing this? And I said, well, because one of the main reasons is I have a staff, and if I retire, they don't have jobs. And she said, so you think they want you to keep working for that reason? And well, and they were very gracious about it. But, so I retired a year early. But one of the best questions was, I had a recent seminary graduate. We were at a First Call theological conference. You remember those things? And it was shortly after I'd announced my retirement. And she just looked at me and she said, so if you had it to do over again, to run for bishop, would you have done it? And I'd never thought of that. And I said, in a minute. I said, I'd do it over again, right? This is not about that. But that question was the most helpful thing for freeing me that I got from anybody. Because then the guilt and the obligation just sort of drifted away. And it was good. One other thing, retirement's complex because for some people, because, what's the right age? How old are we supposed to be? And certainly, Tim, you talked about, I think, Social Security has something to do with that. And, but for us, both my wife's dad and my dad died when they were 64.
Mm.
And, they both had, our parents had all these dreams and visions. And we just know you don't always get that.
Hmm.
They both died, one from cancer, one from a heart attack. And that was it. And we just said, we don't want to wait. And it was right for us.
Yeah, with respect to obligations, I think about that. I mentioned that the congregation was in the midst of a building project the last few years of my ministry there. And there's a fair amount of obligation you have with that and the capital fund appeal. And for me, that having that in that building project, it felt like it was the right thing to do for the sake of the congregation. And so it really gave me something to focus on with that seemed purposeful and helpful to the congregation. It was something that I felt I could do well. That was important. If you think you can do something well and you enjoy doing that, that's a good way to end. If you can, a friend of mine is out in Washington, a pastor. He's going to work for a few more years because he says he feels like he's just hitting his stride. After 30 plus years, he feels like he's really got this stuff figured out and is enjoying it. And so he wants to work a few more years in that call and kind of go out feeling really good about himself. So he's really in a fortunate position for that to take place. The other thing that happened to me is that in the final months of my ministry, I had some real serious problems with my vision. I was losing my vision and had surgery in May, early May, and then I was on leave for 6 weeks, and this isn't the last few months of my work there. That kind of helped me wrap things up too. I really couldn't see myself continuing to work if I was going to have significant vision problems, and so that really kind of said, it really is the right time to leave. But hopefully that kind of thing won't happen to any of you, I would hope. But do expect the unexpected, whatever it might be. You might need to be ready for something unexpected.
So, I hear you both really talking about that discernment and just how contextual it is for you and your lives, and how, your congregation or your synod and your staff, So then how do you navigate the timing of telling a congregation you're going to leave? That was one of Joyce's questions. How far in advance do you recommend telling the congregation? And what was your process of sharing that news, as a whole? And then what sort of planning was part of that?
Well, Laura, I'll put on my bishop hat again, because that's, every synod is different. You really need to talk to your bishop or your synod staff, because that decision, if you're under call, is not solely yours. Because every congregation is different, every call is different. One of the things we did in the Northwest Synod of Wisconsin is, and this was because interims are becoming harder and harder to find. And so we started using our pastors, our good pastors, who were in good calls, good matches, and we started meeting with them. We'd say, let us know when you're thinking about retirement, just thinking about it. And we'd like to talk to them a year before retirement, so we could say, again, it was contextual, but can you announce this like 9 months out, 10 months out, kind of like what Mark did, and then you just stay here through the process until they get a new pastor. Now, don't go to your bishop and say that I said you're supposed to do this. Okay, and I'll be in trouble.
YME, yeah.
Yeah. But it really worked well for us almost every time. If they were good pastors, if the relationship with the congregations were healthy. But it used to be you weren't supposed to do that. You were just supposed to have this. I don't know, Art, have you gotten any of you as a synod? I think you're off in Southwest, aren't you? Yeah.
And yeah, Corinne's in Southeast.
Okay.
I haven't talked with John about specifically when to announce, but I'm going to have a call with him in the morning so I could ask.
Yeah.
And I could report back and I could say, oh, well, that's not the way Rick Hoyme would do it.
Exactly.
I'm sure he would appreciate that.
Yeah, he would. He'd really love that. Yeah.
He's much more relaxed, by the way, now that he's not running for bishop again.
Mhm.
And, he's let us all know that almost a year early that
Mhm.
this is it for me.
Yeah.
Your timing might be really good, Art.
I'll, if I can tag on to that too, and my wife and I began talking about retirement at first, in the plan, sort of the dreaming stage when we were probably in mid-50s. We went to the Portico or, pre-retirement seminary that time. And so it was as part of our conversation from time to time for quite a few years. And that was really helpful for us. But, and then when we'd originally thought we'd retire at 62, and then the congregation got interested in a building project and I signed on to that. And so we knew it'd be a couple of years longer. We retired, we were 64. And I started thinking through these plans, probably at least 2 years ahead of time. How am I going to do this? When will I announce it? I was kind of convinced that this traditional call process was not in the best interest of the congregation. I was tossing around ideas of maybe I should stay until the new pastor comes aboard or it's almost there, kind of like what Rick mentioned. It didn't turn out that way, but we did. I talked to the assistant to the bishop who does call process work at Southeast, probably a year and a half ahead of time. And we had several conversations. We met a number of times. I was going over here some thoughts that I had. I knew that they weren't, regular process kinds of things. She and the bishop were open to that. And we kind of developed that over the course of, almost a year. As the retirement, and I knew probably a year ahead of time that was, when I was going to retire, give or take 6 months. And when it seemed like I had the plan pretty well set, that would have been, I retired July 2019. So I think I had things kind of in my head that the fall before, so the fall of 2018. And then I met with a group of, they were trusted, wise leaders that I just wanted to say, here's what I'm thinking. And I wanted to get their feedback. And I was willing to adjust my plans depending on what they may say. And that would have been in, I think, December of 2018. After that conversation, my plans firmed up and I announced to the council in January of 2019. In that process of announcing the retirement, I was also proposing a plan as to how to start the call process soon. Normally, like Rick was saying, the pastor retires and then they get an interim and then they start the call process. And I was not comfortable with that for our congregation. And so then the council set up some committee is to start get started on it, and then the call committee was established before I think March or something like that. And we had some self-study stuff done before the call committee. So we switched things around in a way that seemed to me to make more sense for the congregation. And it also, when I ran it by people of the congregation, they thought that made sense for them too. Again, every place is different. It seems to have worked out. That there was an interim pastor for 9 months, I think, and the new pastor started there last October. So it was about about a year, 2 months between calls.
Mark, something you said earlier, I had to write it down because it made me giggle a little bit because it's impossible. But also I exactly know what you mean. You said be ready for the unexpected, which we just can't be ready. But somehow you must have shifted gears, right? When the unexpected happened.
Yeah, well, when it comes to something physical like eye surgery, and I you kind of have to. That's not that I was having vision troubles for several months leading up to that. This whole call and retirement announcement happened, and the vision things happened all at once, and I had to make some significant adjustments. And my vision is better now, but yeah, I had to let go of some things that I'd hoped to do.
Yeah.
In those
Just
final.
at the hospital, I see so many people, they never expected any of what's happened. And all of a sudden they're kind of reeling, and that's a distressing moment. The privilege of my job is I get to sit with them and help them to step back and say, so what now, right? I mean, you just have to change gears when things that we don't expect happen and just rethink things.
Yeah, it helped that, for one thing, we had our plans pretty well set. We felt very secure in our decisions, and we felt confident about our decisions. That helped a lot.
Are there other process questions that you all would have? I feel like there was some good detail given just in how you both approached communication and synod conversation and contextually just reading your own congregations. But are there other things you would wonder about in terms of logistics or other questions too? No, go ahead, Denise.
So Mark, and Rick, you brought that up too. What was special about your congregation that you thought it needed to not do the normal process of wait for you to leave and then get an interim and then do that? So was there something particular about this congregation that you would do it that way instead of the traditional way?
Yeah, perhaps. I felt that that was a really healthy congregation, and I felt that there was really good momentum for ministry that had built up over several years, and we had a real sense, I think, of being really hopeful for the future, it was a congregation that had always been accustomed of being pretty adaptive and flexible. And it was my feeling, and we had just completed a building project. And so my sense was that a traditional call process would take perhaps a couple of years, which wouldn't be unusual. If you don't even start the call process until after a few months after the interim pastor has arrived. So it probably would be at least 2 years between call pastors serving. And to me, it seemed like the congregation could really could lose some momentum in the meantime. And I felt, again, I felt like we were healthy. I didn't think that there would be any, issues they had to work through, which can be the case in sometimes for sure. And they were kind of raring to go. And I think they needed that chance to get going sooner rather than later. Hopefully that'll work out okay.
And I'll echo Mark is being very humble, which he comes by that genetically. But when you've been in a congregation for 32 years in a large congregation, and this is not an unhealthy thing, but they really become very senior pastor dependent. And it's not an unhealthy dependency, it's just the way the dynamics are. And we had that in a congregation in the Northwest Synod of Wisconsin where, very similar to Mark, just been there a long time, healthy church. And he just retired and brought in a pretty good interim. Their giving dropped, their attendance dropped. Boy, they were just reeling because it wasn't the right interim. And it's so contextual. And that's why I just say you need to talk to your Synod staff and give them your opinion. You know your churches, you know your calls. They don't have to listen to you, but it has great value.
So
Great
I have a
value.
question. As far as giving time to all your kids and grandkids, how do you do that? You have a certain way that you travel and try to hit everybody, or have them come to you, or probably depends on which child, or
Art must have what'd you say, 30? How many grandkids?
We have 3 daughters. We have 10 grandchildren.
Yeah.
And 7 of them are within an hour's drive of us.
That was one of the things. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that makes it easy to stay in touch with them under normal circumstances. We can go to their sporting events, with their concerts at school and all of those kind of things. The other family moved to Nebraska for a while. Now they live in southern Wisconsin. And the oldest grandson has served his time in the Army and bought a house down in Florida. So yeah, we'd love to go and visit them because, we like to travel as well. And going to these different places would be fun. We haven't seen our daughter who lives in Wisconsin. We haven't been to their house because of COVID. So we're looking forward to that. And our grandson down in Florida, same thing. But, that's part of the planning, I suppose. And I imagine it does matter which child you're talking about. I've seen you, though, going in an RV and camping along the way, visiting all the national parks and visiting people out in Oregon. That seems like a really well thought out plan of attack.
Yeah, we only have 2 kids, one in the cities and one in Oregon. But that was part of our conversation. The one in Oregon has our 2 grandchildren. And but we just said, we can't, for us, we have to retire where we want to retire. And we're not going to build it around their lives because they move. But that was just what we did. And travel is easier now. But in normal times, it's easy.
Yeah. We took the same approach. We have a daughter and her husband and 3 grandkids in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're pretty sure they'll be there until the kids are through the public school system. They're in grade school now. Our other daughter and her husband were in the Twin Cities, and they had talked for a number of years about relocating. They're self-employed, they can live wherever they want. And they talked about living in Utah or Colorado or Tennessee. And so we thought, well, they could be any place. And we took the approach of where would we want to be? And and that was our decision that we would, it was one of our dreams. We want to have a lake home, and we wanted to be done with winter. And we would figure out the grandkid thing in the meantime. Having a lake home means that the grandkids like to visit. So we're hoping for that. And it just so happened that our daughter and son-in-law who live in the Twin Cities sold their home in the Twin Cities and said, we think we might want to live in Tucson. And they did this as their first child was being born. so they're down here with us, and they spent the summer with us up in Spooner, which was an extraordinary blessing. We just that's something that wasn't planned by anybody. So that was our approach. We first thought, where did we want to settle, and then figured out how to make it work from there. But that decision about where you want to live that's an important one. Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah.
So just as, these past months have unfolded and you feel the tensions around just how people are understanding what's happening in our country and in the world, and just how people are processing it all. One thing I think about is, how do you choose a place where you're around like-minded people? Because that's going to be part of what makes me happy, just to have people around that process current events in a way that I would process them.
You know,
Or at
Sarah,
least there's not an absence of like-minded people.
Yep.
Right? Like you're not
Yeah.
the only person who
Right.
thinks like you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
give you an example, Sarah. So the first winter we retired, we came down here to Arizona and we rented a place in a retirement 55 and older. And that's a whole long story. I remember the first time we visited friends here, we went, this place is an abomination unto the Lord. I mean, who would live here? And then we came back about 3 years later and went, well, I suppose you could do it. And then about 3 years later, I was like, this is kind of cool. I could live here. So we did it, and it was fun. We have friends here, and then they had friends. But then last year, Art said we bought an Airstream, and we traveled all winter in Florida and Texas until COVID hit, and stayed in state parks and just went wherever we wanted. But we really missed people, and we missed relationships. And we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't tried it. Because we've done a lot of traveling since retirement, and like Art said, we've been, Utah, California, but for a whole winter, we found out we really didn't like it. And so we sold that and bought a place here in this park. There's like 8 or 10 couples, and they're all older than we are, but we all voted the same way in November. And we share those same values. And that matters in this environment. It just matters. And we haven't looked back once. It was the right decision for us. But just as a retired clergy and retired clergy spouse, where do you find your support? Where do you find your community? Who are your friends? Who do you hang out with? What do you do? It's different, especially if you retire in a whole different place.
Yeah, that's what we did as well. I had an advantage in that, as I said, my parents retired in 1992. They're still here. They're 90 and 91 and doing well, and we're really blessed to live in the same community as they are. So we had a model for, they kind of showed us how it's done in a way that we thought we could do too. And not everybody can have 2 places. And not everybody wants to have two places, for example, but it's worked for us. And a lot of it has to do with the example set by my parents. And so one thing that might be helpful for you is to, do you know of anybody who's retired and you'd say, yeah, I'd like to do what they do and maybe learn from them in a way if you can. That might be something helpful for you.
Thank you.
Great question.
I'll put in a plug for the 55 plus communities too. They're nice places to live.
They really are. And especially with COVID is that we live in this, I suppose there's almost 1,000 units in this one. But we can see people every day. We can sit outside during happy hour in the afternoon. We're all socially distanced. But we can have conversations with people, and we can, we take our dog down to the dog park and we talk to other people and our dogs play, and it feels almost kind of normal. And emotionally, it's made a huge difference for us.
It's easy to meet people in these communities, which is a real plus. If you are a pastor and your whole community has been your congregation, as it has been for me, if you're a pastor who's moved, you don't need to meet a new community. It's built in. Your people are right there. And so for me, this community here outside of Tucson has been nice because it really is easy to meet people, which is nice. That's been a real plus.
We just got a bunch of work done. We live in, they're called park models. It's like 399 square feet. So you got to make sure your marriage is good. But so we hired this guy, a retired guy, to do a bunch of work on our park model and I worked with him because that's how he does it. And we're about a week and a half into the project, and he finally gets around to asking me what I did for a living. And all of you have been through this dance because they go, and he had a really very colorful vocabulary. And so for about 2 days, the vocabulary got a little bland, and then it came back, but it's, that part doesn't go away in retirement as people go. So you were a pastor, you are a pastor, but it's just figuring out what your role is. Yeah.
So Mark and Rick, knowing what you know now, what do you wish you would have thought about earlier or thought about at all? Is there any sort of thing you look back and go, I mean, I know, like you talked about surprises and being ready for the unexpected. But is there anything as you look back on preparing to retire, any nugget that you've landed on, like, ooh, I did not think enough about this, or any wisdom there?
One of the things I would throw in, and I've talked about this, is to have a chance to talk to someone about the financial piece, because when one retires, you go from being a saver to a spender, because you're not saving for retirement anymore. You're now spending this money. And so, for example, our financial guy, like when I retired, I had a car working for the Synod, so we needed to buy another car. And the last few years I worked, we always paid cash for cars. We had a system, we saved up the money, and then we paid ourselves back. And so he said, oh, no. You don't pay cash for cars anymore. I went, well, what do you mean? He said, your job is to go out and buy a car and find 2 to 3% interest. He said his job is to earn us 7 to 8 to 10%. But he said, if you pay $30,000 for a car, it's gone. Because you can't get that $30,000 back because you're not earning money anymore. We're almost 3 years into this and my head is still getting wrapped around that.
Mhm.
It's a different way to look at
Hmm.
money. I'm not saying it's the right or the wrong way. It's just different. And the cool part is you don't have to wait to get stuff. If you have the resources, you just get it. And if your kids don't like it, that's tough.
Yeah, it does take a while to get used to that sense of how much money do we really have? I
Right.
mean, you can look at the numbers and, the numbers of here's the balance of this and the balance of that. But what does that really mean? And it took all, I didn't really know how much we'd have to withdraw from our pension program to be able to make ends meet from month to month until the year was over. And then I look back and say, oh, okay, well, that's how much we spent. I guess this is how much we need. And it's an adjustment. But
Yeah.
but being prepared for that by going set up a budget beforehand, even not in however detailed you want. Just take a good guess at it, and how do things look, and go over that with someone who can help you go over it.
In the Portico, one of the things I remember from the seminar we went to, and they talked about, you have the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. Is those first years of retirement, if your health is good, and you never know this stuff, that's when you go. And that's when you spend money. And then as you get a little older, it becomes slow go, and you travel less, and you do less. And then eventually, like we bought our park model here from this 93-year-old lady in Eastern Washington State, who all of a sudden hit the no-go years. Her legs don't work anymore. Her brain is great, but she just can't go anymore. And I told her that about no-go, and she laughed. She thought that was so funny. She goes, that's me, no-go. But yeah, it's been really true for us.
Are there any final questions? I want to wrap us up here with prayer and just preparing for Thursday, but I don't want to cut anybody off. Wouldn't it have been fun to be sitting in a restaurant and having this as the conversation's really gone on? I just thought, oh, when we first dreamt about this, it was in a room, and maybe we're drinking cocktails and iced tea, and anyway, this is lovely to facilitate this even on Zoom. It's just lovely. So and maybe in the future we'll do this again where we are in the same room, and wouldn't that be lovely?
You'll have to come to Arizona to do that in January.
Because we ain't going back.
I totally go.
As long as it's not in Rick and Diane's 300 and some foot
Park model.
We lived the first 6 months out of the first year, we were in a 25-foot Airstream.
Yeah.
And so one thing in retirement is you better tend to your marriage. Because you spend a lot of time with each other.
Yeah.
I think you're all married. I think so. I'm not sure.
Well, so Thursday, we will really kick off our time together by really reflecting on these connections. And those of you that are married, each of you do this and talk about, reflect on how it is you're connected. What needs to be tended to, what needs to be planted, what needs to be uprooted, what needs to be pruned. So spend some time with that, and we'll dive into that together on Thursday, and then really just talk about living into retirement. And I think we've been, the ground has really been laid well here, nurtured well for that conversation. I'm going to share my screen here, I hope, and we'll pray together before we end our time. Let's see. Okay. So I will ask you, I think it's been lovely that a lot of us have been unmuted a lot, but I will ask you to mute because it is hard to do unison praying and reading. But I will keep obviously mine unmuted as we pray together. So let's just take a few moments and breathe deeply. Breathe in the breath of God and remember that you are a child of God. You are loved. And can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see my screen? Am I sharing it correctly? Okay, just. Let us pray. Holy God, holy and mighty, holy and immortal, have mercy on us. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. Show us your mercy, O God, and grant us your salvation. Give us the joy of your saving help again, and sustain us with your bountiful spirit. Give peace in all the world, for only in you can we live in safety. Keep the nations under your care and guide us in the way of justice and truth. Let your way be known upon earth, your saving health among all nations. Let not the needy be forgotten, nor the hope of the poor be taken away. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and sustain me with your Holy Spirit. Lord, hear my prayer, and let my cry come before you. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. We give thanks to you, Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously protected us today. We ask you to forgive us all our sins where we have done wrong, and graciously to protect us tonight. Into your hands we commend ourselves, our bodies, our souls, and all that is ours. Let your holy angels be with us, so that the wicked foe may have no power over us. Amen. Let us bless the Lord. Thanks be to God. Almighty God, bless us, defend us from all evil, and bring us to everlasting life. Amen. We'll go in peace, friends, and we'll see you Thursday. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Good night. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good job. That was lovely.
They're just the right guys, right?
Yep.
Just a
Yep.
nice,
It was really, really good.
yeah. And I really, your video, I knew your video was going to help me because I was like, gosh, I'm just really uninspired. And so, you got that out there and I was like, oh, that's it. So thank you for that. Because that's really going to beef up Thursday. Because I was starting to feel like Thursday wasn't going to be enough, but having people really talk through how they feel rooted and connected and how they don't.
Yeah.
That's
I might see if my people that I've talked to who can't make it would send me just a paragraph about their rooted in connectedness in retirement.
Yeah.
And then we could at least offer that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm sad that we didn't have any women, but it's COVID and funerals and all
Yeah.
kinds of things. So
Yeah.
it just is what it is. And this is lovely. So
My friend was like, I do nothing. And so I don't know how it is. I have two unmovable things on the nights you need me.
when you told me that, I was like, who keeps a schedule right now? But we all have meetings and stuff. So,
Oh my goodness.
that was funny though. Yeah, but a retired person, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's hilarious.
You hanging in there?
Yeah, John's mom is still in the hospital.
Oh gosh.
And so, and we've said this now for days. Fingers crossed, maybe tomorrow. So same.
Okay. You can't pin your hope on the calendar.
No.
It's a bad plan.
No, and I learned that the hard way on Monday when I just was like, oh, well, Monday. I mean, it just really looked like
Yeah.
Monday. And then it was not Monday, and it was not Monday pretty early on in Monday. And I was just like, I was wiped out the rest of the day. I was so disappointed. And so, because anyway.
I have my girlfriends and we do our New Year's Eve. That's like, honestly, there's not any family thing I look forward to more than my friend gathering on New Year's Eve. It is like my year.
Yeah.
And we had to Zoom it. And they were talking about, oh, probably next year we won't even be ready. I'm like, yes, we will. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't quite say it like that, but inside it was
Felt that
exactly that. I'm like, shut that bleep up because, oh my gosh.
There are two teenagers in my life that have birthdays. One's today and one's later this week. Anyway, but one's turning 17 and one's turning 18. And people that they love both reached out to me saying, can you send us like a 30-second video wishing them a happy birthday? And when I sent them, I thought, ooh, that was cathartic for you, Laura. So I turned on the Beatles birthday song, right?
Yeah.
Which is just a rockin' song. And then I just held my phone out in front of me and sang that with it blaring in the background, jumping up and down. And it was joyful, but I was also like, ooh, little manic, Laura, like you're getting some stuff out. But I seriously laughed and it was just perfect. But I also like, oh boy, you kind of got something out in those.
I have a patient and he's been in the hospital for a while. I've never met him because he was in a different unit and then needed heart surgery. So now my unit, and I met the wife, but newlywed because they got married in the hospital. I'm like, oh yes, it's you.
Oh.
So anyway, this woman
married in the hospital?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's all crazy. I can't say more, but
yeah, no.
She had like just her middle fingers with sparkly glitter detail. And this is the question I asked her. It's not a good chaplain question. I'm like, is that so you got a little stout when you flip people the bird?
Oh, that's a perfect chaplain question. What are you kidding me?
She kind of giggled, but I'm like, I really don't get that. But it was pretty funny. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
All right. So tomorrow, this is my stupid schedule because, chaplains have stupid schedules.
Yeah.
I work until 10 tomorrow, but Thursday I go in at 8. So I'm just going to do my best to conserve some resources, but I may be a little like zoned out on Thursday night, but I'll be there.
We'll take you.
Okay.
We'll take however you can show up. It'll be great. Thank you.
This was lovely tonight.
Yeah, and just thank you for how you riffed on. I mean, it was the same thing, but it was different. It was a different angle, and
yeah. Oh, I have to tell you this. This was really funny because when I apologized for my dog, Denise and Kevin, direct messaged me, and they said our elderly dog is barking now. She can't see, so she barks at phantoms. And I wrote back, "Don't we all?" Bless her heart.
Don't we all bark at phantoms?
Right?
Yes, we do.
Oh, there's a song my brother and I, when we run, we think deeply about songs. It's a problem. But anyway, there's a song about that. I should send it to you and you'll be like, yep.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, friend. I love you. Thank you.
Love you. Have a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.